but I'm not picking up a heat signature.
Russ, come in. Russell, there is something moving in front of me. I mean, I can only describe it like a black silhouette walking past.
Breaking news has just surfaced about Expedition Bigfoot, and it's far more disturbing than anyone imagined. After years of complete silence, new information has finally come to light, revealing why the hit paranormal series suddenly vanished mid-season. Leaked reports, suppressed footage, and insider testimony all point to one terrifying conclusion. The crew didn't walk away. They were forced to. What they uncovered deep in the wilderness was so shocking, so unprecedented, that production was shut down within days. And now, as these details begin to surface, fans are realizing that what's coming out could change everything we thought we knew about the legend of Bigfoot. The silence that started it all. It all began with silence. No warning, no finale, just an empty time slot where Expedition Bigfoot was supposed to air. One week, the team was teasing new discoveries from the Pacific Northwest. The next, everything was gone. Episodes were pulled from streaming, social media accounts were wiped clean, and even promotional clips vanished overnight, as if someone had flipped a switch and erased the show's existence entirely. Fans flooded the network with messages, desperate for answers, but no one replied. Not the producers, not the cast, not even the streaming platforms that once promoted the series. The silence was total, absolute, and unsettling. And now, years later, insiders have begun to break that silence. What they've revealed is that the show didn't end naturally, it was forcibly shut down.
I got a flash
Of eye shine.
peeking around that tree right there. It's gone.
Like, what is going on here?
It feels almost as if something is messing with us.
Yes.
According to leaked production memos, the crew was pulled from the field under what's being described as emergency extraction protocols during the final days of filming. Helicopters were dispatched into the mountains, forcing the team to leave behind thousands of dollars in gear. The reports describe the crew as disoriented, distressed, and unwilling to continue filming. These weren't just weekend adventurers or hobbyists. This was a team made up of survival experts, scientists, and ex-military trackers. For a group like that, to abandon their equipment and evacuate without warning, something extraordinary had to have happened. Something that made even the most seasoned professionals turn back. The most chilling clue came from a series of encrypted radio transmissions sent the night before production was officially shut down. Audio logs later surfaced from a deleted server, and what they revealed was deeply unsettling. In the recordings, you can hear panicked voices, bursts of static, and one phrase repeated twice before the feed cuts out: "It's moving around us." Within 24 hours of that transmission, the signal abruptly ended, and filming stopped entirely. The crew was recalled, and each member was reportedly required to sign non-disclosure agreements under threat of legal action.
Did you smell that?
Oh, wow. This thing's going off. Jeez, look at it.
Ronnie, this thing is spiking off the charts.
Even the network executives who greenlit the show have since distanced themselves, refusing interviews and issuing carefully worded statements. The official explanation given to the public was that bad weather and logistical issues had forced an early end to production, but the internal notes told a very different story, one that referenced biological anomalies, unclassified vocal phenomena, and potential risk to personnel. These weren't the words of a simple production cancellation. These were the words of a cover-up. Something happened in those woods that made the network stop everything, something they weren't ready for. And whatever it was, it terrified even the people who make their living chasing the impossible. What Expedition Bigfoot really was. Before everything went quiet, Expedition Bigfoot wasn't just another TV show chasing shadows in the woods. It was something bigger. A research mission wrapped in entertainment. It set out to use science, not stories, to answer one of the oldest mysteries in North America. The team behind it wasn't made up of thrill seekers or conspiracy chasers. It was led by Bryce Johnson, a man who began as a skeptic but found himself questioning what he thought he knew. Alongside him were Dr. Maria Mayer, a primatologist known for her work in wildlife research, survival expert Russell Accord, and tracker Ronnie LeBlanc, whose instincts for the wild were unmatched. Together, they didn't just wander into the woods, they brought a full arsenal of modern technology. From AI-powered thermal cameras to drones, parabolic microphones, and even DNA analysis kits, the expedition approached Bigfoot the way scientists would approach an unclassified species. What made the series stand out was its tone. There were no shaky cam monster chases or exaggerated reactions. Instead, they collected hard data, mapped migration routes, and even studied environmental DNA samples. For the first time, the search for Bigfoot wasn't treated like a campfire story. It was treated like serious fieldwork. The audience noticed. What started as a niche project quickly turned into a phenomenon. Ratings climbed each season, and what began as cautious curiosity grew into a full-blown obsession. Viewers weren't just watching for entertainment. They were following an investigation. Each new episode took the crew deeper into regions barely touched by humans. The forests grew denser, the nights longer, and the encounters stranger. It wasn't just what they saw, but what they felt out there, as if the land itself was aware of their presence. But as the cameras rolled, something else began brewing behind the scenes. The deeper the expedition went, the more unpredictable things became. Crew logs from those final days painted a picture that was anything but normal. It started small, a drained battery here, a frozen GPS unit there. Then, it snowballed. Equipment that had been tested and working perfectly began failing for no reason. Even the radio frequencies, usually clear in remote locations, were jammed for hours without explanation. At first, the crew brushed it off as environmental interference. Maybe humidity, maybe elevation, maybe magnetics. But after a while, the coincidences piled too high to ignore. The forest wasn't just remote, it was reacting to them. Then came the part no one could rationalize. Animals in the area began vanishing without a trace. No prints, no signs of struggle, not even the typical patterns of predation. They were simply gone. Trail cameras that were set up across miles of terrain began picking up movement. Fast, heavy, and completely unidentifiable. The footage didn't match any known species, not even close. Sometimes the cameras caught flashes of heat signatures that were too large, too tall, and moved too smoothly to be any normal animal. The crew began finding massive footprints that defied logic. The impressions were deep, far apart, and perfectly formed. A hoaxer couldn't have made them, not in that terrain, and not in that time frame. Each new print sent a ripple of unease through the team. Production notes from the final weeks showed that the atmosphere in the camp had shifted. What was once a professional research operation started to feel more like a survival outpost. The crew began sleeping in shifts. No one wanted to be alone at night. Weapons were kept closer, not for dramatic effect, but out of real fear. The quiet confidence that had defined their work was slipping away, replaced by a cautious, unspoken tension. Something or someone was following them, not charging at them or attacking, but tracking their movements, observing them with purpose. It wasn't random, it wasn't instinctual, it was intelligent. A journal entry from one of the camera operators summed it up in a single chilling line. "It knows we're here." That moment changed everything. What had started as an ambitious field study began to unravel into something no one had prepared for. It was no longer about collecting evidence or debunking myths. It became about staying safe and making it through the night. For the crew, the mission had crossed a line. The forest wasn't just a backdrop anymore. It had become a presence, aware, unpredictable, and impossibly close. That was the moment when Expedition Bigfoot stopped being a scientific project and turned into a survival story. The first clear sign that something had gone seriously wrong came after a long stretch of quiet days in the field. The team had set up base in a remote valley, surrounded by dense pine forest and fog-covered ridgelines. For nearly a week, nothing happened. No movement, no sounds, not even animal tracks. Then, without warning, the sensors came alive. Motion detectors, thermal scanners, and seismic readers all began lighting up at once. The readings were massive, fast, precise, and coming from multiple directions. Dr. Maria Mayer later described it as controlled chaos. Whatever was moving out there wasn't stumbling through the brush, it was circling them. The discovery. Russell and Maria were the first to follow the strange signal. They moved cautiously along the riverbank, about half a mile from camp, until they stopped, stunned by what lay before them. Pressed deep into the wet mud was a massive handprint. The palm alone stretched close to 14 inches across, and the finger impressions were so detailed that even the skin texture was visible. It wasn't from a bear, and it definitely wasn't human. Whatever had made it didn't just pass through, it had power. Russell later described the moment in simple terms. You could feel the strength in that print. Whatever left it behind had been close, watching and aware of them. When they returned to camp, the mood had changed. The team, usually energized by discoveries like this, grew quiet. A heavy stillness settled over the forest. Even the insects, acting as a constant backdrop of noise, seemed to stop. As darkness closed in, Bryce sat reviewing the drone footage captured earlier that evening. On the thermal camera, something appeared, a tall, upright heat signature weaving between the trees before vanishing behind a ridge. The way it moved was deliberate, almost calculated. It wasn't trying to hide like an animal would. It moved as if it knew it was being observed. Then the sounds began. Low, resonant calls echoed through the forest, caught clearly on the parabolic microphones. They came from multiple directions, deep, guttural, and rhythmic. Minutes later, faint responses echoed back from miles away, like a distant exchange between unseen figures. Ronnie tried to explain it away. Maybe echo, maybe another species. But the cadence didn't fit anything familiar. It wasn't random noise. It had a tone. It had rhythm. That's when Maria quietly said what everyone was already thinking. It's not calling out. It's communicating. And in that moment, the camp's unease turned into something much heavier. Dread. The next morning, a camera crew discovered trees freshly marked with deep claw gashes nearly 10 feet high. The bark was torn and the sap was still wet. That was the first night the team armed themselves, not out of paranoia, but instinct. Bryce's journal entry from that night read, "It's here, it's watching, and I think it wants us to know." Whatever was out there wasn't running anymore. It had stepped out of legend and was toying with them. Kill site. By the 4th week of the expedition, curiosity had turned into fear. The once lively forest had gone dead silent. The crew was exhausted, running on adrenaline and dread. When they reached the clearing, they froze. It wasn't just an animal kill like they'd seen before. It was a massacre. The ground was torn apart, branches splintered, drag marks in the dirt, and bones, dozens of them. But these weren't scattered randomly the way scavengers leave them. They were arranged almost symmetrically, ribs snapped at perfect angles, joints separated with unnerving precision. When the rest of the crew arrived, the mood shifted from curiosity to alarm. The area didn't look like a feeding ground, it looked like an experiment. Several bones had small, circular holes drilled into them, the marrow removed. The team documented what they could, but even the hardened survivalists were shaken. Bryce later described the scene as calculated brutality. Every clue suggested intelligence, not the chaotic violence of a predator, but the deliberate precision of something that understood anatomy. They took samples and marked the coordinates, preparing to leave. The discovery of the kill site changed everything. What began as a scientific mission had now evolved into something far more dangerous. The team, still reeling from what they'd witnessed, pushed deeper into the valley, following a pattern of moving heat signatures that seemed to shift with purpose. Bryce ordered drones to sweep the ridge while Maria and Ronnie hiked ahead. What they found that day would alter the tone of the entire investigation. The discovery in the frozen woods. Near the edge of a frozen creek, Maria noticed something that seemed ordinary at first glance, a cluster of branches stacked together and sealed by the cold. When the team moved closer, they realized it wasn't a natural formation. The logs hadn't simply fallen that way. They were positioned with care, forming a triangular shape that appeared planned and reinforced with moss and stone. Maria spoke quietly, her tone certain as she said this wasn't an animal's shelter. It had been built by someone. Russ began examining the nearby trees, and soon discovered something that brought the group to a standstill. Bryce later wrote in his field notes that what they had found didn't reflect instinctive behavior. It reflected organization, planning, and intelligence. That night, while reviewing drone footage, the team caught something they couldn't explain. As the camera hovered over the forest clearing, a tall figure emerged briefly from the dark tree line. It bent forward, examining the broken remains of one of the structures they had disturbed earlier that day. The movement was calm, almost cautious, as if it understood exactly what had been touched. Then, the figure straightened, turned, and looked directly into the hovering drone camera, locking eyes with it before vanishing back into the shadows. Thermal imaging showed the figure's heat signature moving quickly through the trees, but it wasn't frantic or panicked. It moved with control, as if it knew exactly where to go. The next morning, the team returned to the site. Maria described feeling watched from all directions. The forest was silent again, but not with the calm of nature. This silence felt intelligent, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. By now, Bryce and the crew had come to a chilling conclusion. Whatever they were tracking wasn't just an animal species. It wasn't primitive. It was something that evolved alongside humanity, observing, adapting, and responding. A being capable of understanding presence, strategy, and retaliation. From that point forward, the expedition stopped feeling like a hunt. It felt like survival. Bryce would later admit that they were no longer the observers. They were being observed. Back at base camp, he spent hours reviewing audio collected from parabolic microphones scattered throughout the forest. For days, there was nothing, only the whisper of wind, distant birds, and the creaking of frozen trees. But then, One night, something different appeared in the recording. It started faintly, a low, rhythmic tone buried beneath the static. The sound didn't match any known animal call. It rose and fell, structured almost like speech. Bryce leaned closer, adjusting the filters, and the sound repeated, this time joined by another tone, lower and overlapping. He froze, realizing what he was hearing wasn't random. It was patterned, consistent, and unmistakably deliberate. It was language. The voices were deep and guttural, but with a rhythm that felt intelligent. There were no growls or mimicry. It was communication. Each sequence contained 3 distinct phrases followed by a pause, then repeated again with subtle tonal variations. The forest outside seemed to respond to the sound, almost pulsing with it. As they continued analyzing the recordings, a disturbing detail emerged. There weren't just 2 voices, there were multiple. Some sounded close, others distant, all weaving together like a coordinated chant. One particular word appeared again and again, Kumba. It came first from a deeper voice, then repeated by others, followed by silence. During playback, Bryce noticed the air in the tent grow still. The ambient noise around them dropped to 0. Even the external microphone stopped recording for 8 full seconds, complete silence, as if the forest itself was listening. Mireya speculated that the word could be a name or perhaps a signal. The call from the darkness. That night, motion sensors were set around the perimeter of camp. Just before 3 a.m., the microphones captured a single, deliberate knock, wood against wood, followed by that same deep voice echoing through the darkness. Kumba. The team rushed outside, flashlights cutting through the cold mist. But there was nothing. No movement, no prints, no sound. Only the faint echo of that word fading through the trees. The next morning, Bryce radioed the network, requesting immediate backup and authorization to leave the site. The reply that came back was clinical and detached. Continue documentation until further notice. They were being told to stay, even as the forest began to respond. Within days, Expedition Bigfoot no longer felt like a scientific expedition. The camp had become something closer to a containment zone. Security was tightened. Communication with the outside world was limited. Producers stopped giving daily reports to the network. Then, chaos erupted. Someone from the post-production team anonymously leaked a short clip of the forest audio to an online forum. It was less than 30 seconds long, but it was enough. 2 distinct voices could be heard, their tones structured and deliberate, as if exchanging words. The clip ended with a long, deep exhale and a burst of static. Within hours, it spread everywhere. Audio engineers, linguists, and online analysts examined it, slowed it down, and filtered it. Every group agreed on one point. The cadence and tone didn't match any known animal. The word Kumba was clearly audible. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. The shutdown. In the days that followed, whispers began circulating about government involvement. Unmarked vehicles were reportedly seen near the production site. The facility storing the raw footage was said to have been confiscated for review. No agency ever confirmed involvement. But whether it was corporate liability, national security, or something far stranger, one thing was clear. Whatever they had captured was never meant to reach the public. By the time the dust settled, Expedition Bigfoot no longer existed. No press release, no farewell statement, nothing. To the public, it appeared to be a sudden cancellation. But to those who were there, it felt like something else entirely, a silencing. Months later, one small interview reignited the mystery. Bryce Johnson appeared briefly on a podcast, his tone calm but distant. He spoke carefully, choosing every word. Some discoveries change you, he said, and some discoveries change everything. When asked to elaborate, he paused, then added quietly, "We found something that looked back at us." That single sentence sent shockwaves through the online community. But after that, Bryce disappeared again. No interviews, no social posts, no contact. Mireya and Russ moved on to other projects, refusing to discuss the expedition. Ronnie left the field altogether, citing mental exhaustion. Whether this was corporate damage control or a government cover-up, no one could say. But one thing remained certain. Expedition Bigfoot wasn't just canceled, it was erased.